Hi, this is Ms. Bahak. Welcome to the Look Good, Move Well podcast, where you can get fresh ideas for your training, nutrition, and lifestyle to immediately put to use. Listen in with Marcus Philly, the creator of functional bodybuilding, and myself.
Hi, I'm Marcus Philly. We're broadcasting from Revival Strength in San Rafael, California.
We'll be talking about avoiding burnout, keeping your passion alive for training, and fueling your body and mind so you can look good, move well now, and for years to come. Have you ever tried to change your nutrition by cutting out things like sugar and alcohol completely, but struggled to keep it up over the long term? Listen in for the 3 questions to ask yourself or your clients before any habit change with nutrition or training, and get some bonus tips on switching things up without having to think about what you're missing. Okay. I think the nutrition topics have been really resonating with people. I mean, they've resonated with me just from having the conversations, just around the way it shifts how you're thinking about food. And I was thinking about this the other day, and what I thought of was like the way that someone like you, looks at food and your entire relationship with it highly dictates all the different things that you do and how hard it is for you to do, right? So this came to me when I was, when the tragic Anthony Bourdain, thing happened a couple weeks back. I thought like, okay, you've talked a lot about how he was a big influence for you and how just you watched a ton of cooking shows growing up, and that was some like food and cooking and culinary arts. That was something that really had a huge effect on you. I mean, you have to take into account that I think that the way that you view healthy eating is different than somebody like me, or just somebody, who's just trying to start cleaning up their dietary habits. So I don't know. I think just having these conversations has been helpful in the sense of like reframing just little nuggets here and there on how you can think about things. Like that intuitive eating episode really helped people. So the macronutrient one. So I think, just expanding
let's
the
keep
conversation.
it going. I'm so happy to talk about it in a very. It doesn't have to be super structured, and I know we have a couple topics to dive into in this episode. But I took a couple weeks ago when the news about Anthony Bourdain came out. I took it really hard, and that was in large part because, what I learned from him. Food was this vehicle to learn about myself. And he wasn't the only teacher of that, but it was, a profound lesson that I learned from him. Food was a vehicle to explore culture, to explore the world, to, meet new people. And I took advantage of it at a time in my life where I needed to discover who I was beyond just a student and an athlete. I needed to figure out like, well, what am I about? And all those lessons from that period of time in my life have informed what I do today for my career and a lot of my views on food, right? Because on the one hand, I've been extremely, far to this end of the spectrum of counting and super like bodybuilding focused in my nutrition. And then I've also been over to the other end where I've like sought out tiny little places in, rural Cambodia where Anthony Bourdain went to eat something very authentic Hmong, and went and did the same thing because I wanted to experience food and the culture behind food and the flavors and all of that, like all that great stuff that comes with that side of things. And it's like, okay, how do I marry those two into something that works for me on a day-to-day basis for a long time?
Yeah. Well, I think that, not to say that, like, this is the only solution, or that just because you have this one piece of it, it's going to help all of the other habits. But I read this, like, stat the other day, and I wish I had the exact number of it because it was pretty profound. It was like, just having awareness around something or enhancing awareness around something can elicit change and continual awareness around something. So part of me, when I thought about that concept, it was like, okay, well, one, I'm not eating as good as I should be. That's like one level of awareness,
Mm-hmm.
right? But then another, the next level that you can kind of pursue here to, with your nutrition and your food is like self-inquiry, right? And so I started testing some of these concepts on a couple of my clients.
Yeah.
And one, it starts with like this, it's a very lengthy, I would say, assessment, triage, questionnaire type of thing where you can kind of get to the root of like, what are the first couple things that we need to focus on in an actionable way? But the point of that, I think, is like the questions that are asked in that intake form, one, help me develop a lot of understanding about this person and what's important and all of those things. But on the other end, just like doing a 3-day food log that we may have talked about in the past, it gives you a level of reflection. Like when you do it, you immediately notice like, oh, this isn't really up to par, or maybe I had a little too much chocolate today, or whatever the case might be.
Yeah.
So it's something I'm still testing, but basically with a lot of these clients who want to make some change with nutrition, I'm trying to take this intuitive eating concept and try to, keep a level of awareness week to week on very basic and small things, some through questions and through forms and filling certain things out, and some through just educational pieces that basically gets your brain going. And just because of that, it's like, yeah, we might have some actionable stuff, but even if we didn't, you're going to start to interact with your environment and your food and everything slightly differently.
Yeah.
It's bound to happen.
Oh, man. It's so funny that you say that because, I'll just name him, Anthony, one of our coaches here, our friend. He's also my client. I've worked with Anthony for over a year now. And and periodically, Anthony is going through something, where he wants some guidance nutritionally. And so what it looks like, and recently this happened, what it will look like is, he sends me something where it's like, hey, I want to, this is what's going on, this is what I'm thinking about, and I want you to maybe look at my food log, and this is what I'm hoping to change. And in all the time that we've ever done this, I've never given him a prescription, like, you should change this thing. It's been a back and forth, about 2 to 3 emails back and forth, where I ask a number of questions, he comes back, ask another couple questions, he comes back, and by the second or third time, the email back to me is like, Coach, this is exactly what I needed to hear. Thank you so much. Like, I totally get it now. And it's like, I didn't actually tell him to do anything, It was just about that inquiry. It was like, get him to raise his awareness.
Yeah.
And I'm, as an outside observer, somebody who cares about him and who tracks him, more than he may know, watching his movements in the gym, watching his, in and out kind of relationships, whatever's happening in his life, there will be things that I see that I would just kind of reflect back to him, be like, well, this has been happening, right? For the last 2 months, this has been a change that you've been going through. And if you can remember back, there was this, injury that you had, which kind of changed up your training for 2 to 3 weeks. And then there was an adaptation phase that happened after that. And just like reflect it back to him. And that allows, him to come to his own conclusions about what he needs to make changes with to feel connected to his food again, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, it's crazy how that works.
Yeah, totally.
That's why you get paid the big bucks.
Oh, yeah. Big bucks, yeah.
Well, on that note, I feel like there's definitely a couple tools here that I found helpful and that I think we could definitely give away in this episode for people to play with.
Totally.
And it's like, okay, if you have a coach, great. If not, then you just kind of sitting down and sitting with these questions and potentially revisiting a different one or developing some type of practice for yourself. I think that alone can, if you start to track it objectively, can improve the way that you start to look at your food. And I can resonate with this one personally because it's like, instead, when something really regarding food feels like a chore, like whether that might be the meal prep aspect of something or just this idea of like, oh, I need to eat better and I need to eliminate the bad things, that stuff can become easier when you have like the right questions, the right reflection, the right timing, and when it happens in a very gradual way versus like, all right, I want you to do X, Y, and Z. Like, I'm sure if you told Anthony, hey, these are the 3 things I want you to go do, he would probably do it, but at the same time, it may not have the same level of impact or lasting impact, potentially.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that there's, I mean, I know the questions that you're, talking about, we talked about them before we started recording, and I think they're very applicable to individuals, and I think they're applicable to coaches, and I think if you're an individual who has a coach, and you bring this to the table with them, it would help them a lot. It would inform them about, a way to approach their coaching of you. And it's something that, I've made the mistake of not asking these types of questions with clients and like forcing something that they're just not ready for. And so it goes, it's like our coaching philosophy of meeting people where they're at, right? Like, this is a great way to just decide, okay, this is where I'm at today, and know that it might change over, the course of a couple days, a couple weeks, a couple months, a year, whatever. But you should just always come back to it.
Yeah. I mean, I've done the exact same thing, and I think that's part of what led me to kind of developing some of this stuff and putting it together and trying it. And then it's been a breath of fresh air when I've gotten some answers back to this stuff, because it's like, if I had pulled the trigger on giving something prescriptive a little too early, like it probably wouldn't have been effective based on what I'm seeing some of these answers are.
Right. I'm thinking of a particular, maybe a particular client where this line of questioning may have saved you some some energy.
I really wish I came across it at that time, but
hey, we learn from our mistakes, and they are our mistakes as coaches.
Yeah. So the first one is this idea of like the 3 questions of, want, willing, and won't. And the first thing that you can do here is ask yourself, what do you actually want? Right? So that gives you an idea of, okay, get concrete. Is it losing weight? Is it gaining muscle? Is it, it just sparks some conversation for you, like, once you do find some of those things. And, you can use that simple line of questioning that people always talk about, like the whys, the 5 whys, like keep asking why. Oh, I want to gain muscle. Why do you want to gain muscle? Well, I want to look better. Why do you want to look better? Well, I want to be more confident. Why do you want to be more confident? Well, I want to attract more girls. Okay. And then, like, you can keep kind of going with that. And then the second one is, what are you willing to do? I think this one is really important because like this kind of brings out like the readiness for a client to change something, and you can understand very quickly, like, what is it that they're actually going to be willing to do and put some time and energy and effort into, because we know a lot of this stuff is it takes up some of that. It's not always easy. So kind of understanding, like, okay, what are you willing to do is important. And then on the flip side, it's what won't you do? This one I think is huge too, because it gives you an idea of territory that just doesn't really need to be explored right now. It's like, who knows, maybe it could be like, well, I'm not willing to stop eating chocolate every day, or I'm not willing to, like a glass of wine that I have with my dinner, like, I'm not willing to take that out. And it's like, cool, we don't need to go near there. It gives you a way to prioritize some of the things that are like, low-hanging fruit, or the things that are at the forefront. That if you just work on some of these things, you can gain momentum. You can actually start to see some change from very simple, basic stuff.
Totally.
So those 3 questions is the first thing that I'm thinking of. What do you want? What are you willing to do? And what won't you do?
Yeah,
Thoughts?
I mean, that's a conversation. That's basically, I mean, those are like the highlights of just about every consultation that we have. I think that's important. It's like, well, what are we chasing? And then sometimes as a coach or as an individual who's asking these questions, there needs to be education around, like, well, these are the things that probably need to happen, right? Because like, I want to look, I want to attract more girls. Well, what are you willing to do? Anything. Okay. What are you not willing to do? I don't, like they just don't even know yet what they may or may not be willing to do because there hasn't been really you haven't painted a picture, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I want to gain muscle mass. Okay, so that probably means you're going to have to, or no, I'm sorry. Let's try a different example. I want to get down to like sub 10% body fat. Okay, we got a decent idea what that looks like, so you're probably going to have to sleep 8+ hours a night. You're going to have to cook and prepare, 87% of all of your food that you eat. And then the food that's not prepared by you still needs to follow some guidelines. You're going to need to get this, you can like lay out some stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And then it's like, so what feels like what are you willing to accomplish? Or like, what are you willing to do of that stuff that I've said? Like, what are you not willing to do? I'm not ready to go there yet. Okay. So let's really focus in on the stuff that you're willing to do. And let's basically create a starting point. What's your body composition today? On 30%. Great. Let's do this for a period of time, and then let's test, right? And then you test. Oh, I'm at 22%. Great. Like, awesome. That was fantastic. Do you want to keep going? Totally. Is there anything that you're now more willing to do than you weren't willing to do before? Yeah. Like, I'm willing to give up this because, man, the results have been awesome, and if this will help me get to the next level, whatever, right? And so then you make a change. Or on the flip side, they're like, no, I still want to keep it the same. You go another period of time, they retest, they're at 20%. They only lost 2% this time. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, well, your results have slowed down. They haven't halted, but they've slowed down. And we can say it's probably likely that you're just because you haven't, gone into these other areas. So anyway, that conversation that continues to happen, or answering those questions at different time points along the way on your journey towards, a physical goal, nutrition goal, something like that, it's super important to have because it'll help you get aligned with why you're doing different things. It'll put more energy and confidence and commitment behind those different, tasks that you have to do to accomplish your goal. And if you don't ask those questions, after a certain period of time, the alignment between like what you were trying to accomplish and what, it's all going to be off. Mm-hmm. So you're like, you get lost and you're not making progress anymore.
I mean, and then I think you save yourself, like setting yourself up for disappointment. When you don't go through some of these questions or get to use these questions or have a coach where you can explore some of the trade-offs with, because like you said, it's like, okay, I want to get to sub 10% body fat. There is a laundry list of things that needs to kind of happen, and it's like, okay, out of all these behaviors or skills, however you break it down, it's like, which one of these are you willing to start with and do right now?
Yeah.
And some might be more attractive to you to start with or doable than others, and you can table the rest for when the time kind of comes, and maybe by that point, because you've seen results, you're like ready to roll and crush it.
Yeah, you're ready to start manscaping suddenly. That's a little inside joke over here, but
it's a requirement if you're under 10% body fat.
Once you get below 15%, you can officially start manscaping.
So that was the first set of questions that I think could be helpful.
Yeah.
The other one, I really like this one because we're talking about coaching and how it's helpful to have a coach or somebody to balance this off of. But let's say that it is just you and you're reading something and you want something that points out to you, like, what's the next right step? Mm-hmm. What should you do? And so this is like called the documentary film crew question. And I love these types of questions. So let me read it here. It's called, let's say a documentary film crew is making a movie of your life. They follow you around all the time, filming everything you do. Oh, shoot. Okay. Filming everything you do. What you ate, when you ate it, where you ate it, and so on. If we were to sit down together this evening and review this footage, what do you think would stand out? If you imagine your life as this kind of movie, what might we see as some of our behaviors that are blocking you from getting what you want? Right?
Right? Did I just nail that one or what? Oh man.
Like when you think about it that way, you're like, oh, okay, like I know. Here's the one or two things that stand out that okay, I'm having too much sugar, or I'm not eating any vegetables, or I don't drink any water. Like whatever things that might be important for you to tackle, like can kind of come from you just like asking the question a different way, reading it a different way, like. Something might click in your brain, and this question might not resonate with everybody, but the way that it does for me, where it's like, ooh, light bulb moment, I kind of know what's next. I think it could do that for some people.
Oh, completely. Yeah. I mean, I wish there was a way to just film yourself all day. Sometimes, like, Megan and I have discussed, like, when we get into arguments. Ooh, we have arguments. I mean, couples have arguments, right? We've said, like, God, I wish someone could just flip a camera on so we could watch ourselves argue and then watch it back, later and be like, oh yeah, that's why that doesn't work, or like, yeah. But yeah, it's, and I think that that scenario, that kind of make believe scenario of like having a way to watch back your life, it's just gonna help highlight for you where you're spending the most time and where you're not spending time, and then that really, when placed next to your goals, it's going to be really clear, like why you are or why you are not, achieving them. Right? It's like, I really want to improve my, and this is perfect for me. Like, here's one that I could, sort of fess up to. It's like, I'll go through periods where I'm like, I'm really feeling sort of tightness or restriction in a certain part of my body. Let's say it's my shoulders, okay? My God, I really want to improve my mobility. And then I like look at the total time that I spent actually working on it versus training versus sitting at my desk on my computer versus, right, driving in a car. And it's like, oh, wow, I spent 15 minutes 2 times this week on it. And I'm like expecting to have like, these world-class like mobile shoulders. Like that just doesn't quite align at all. And I'll make that like commitment to myself. Like I'm going to really work on my mobility. And then it's like, oh, I didn't do it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, yeah. And then at that point it's like, okay, well, go back to the first 3 questions. Like, what do I really want? What am I willing to do? And then what won't I do? Right. And, well, I'm willing to do this much, so therefore that's what I might be able to get from it.
Yeah.
And if I want more than that, and I'm not willing to do it, then I can just kind of alleviate myself of that pressure of being like, oh, I'm not getting it. It's like, oh yeah, you're just not putting in the time. It's okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think the third one here, it's like an Instagram post that I saw on Precision Nutrition's page, and it made me think about like how this has come up for me during different periods. Like, it's just an observation that came to the forefront when I did read that. I'm like, oh, this is kind of true. And really what they were kind of talking about was like when you're trying to eliminate quote unquote bad eating habits, add instead of subtract. So there's this like idea of like, oh, it's going to be taken away from me, right? Like whatever the examples we mentioned before, chocolate, wine, whatever, right? It's like, oh, like I don't want to give that up. Like it feels too daunting, I'm not ready to yet, or whatever the case might be. Yeah. And so when you think about like, okay, well, what if I was to just add more of the things that I should be doing? So maybe it's like the veggies, enough water, adequate protein, and really some of the basic stuff that may not be covered yet. You might find yourself in a position where it's like, oh, well, the cravings for the other things are less, or you're simply so full from those other things that like you forget about it. Like there's been times where that kind of happens, and I was like, that's a very simple like reframe that you could potentially use if you're still on the fence of like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready.
Yeah, I mean that's really why with our clients, with our individual clients that we work with, level 1 nutritional approaches are adding things. Mm-hmm. It's not taking anything away. You're going to drink more water. You're going to have more protein. And you're going to eat more quality foods than you were before, right? So it's just like, it's more of stuff. There's nothing that says you have to, like, and so the examples there, it's like, get somebody who's not drinking water to start drinking, close to their prescribed amount of water in a day. They're hydrated, they're going to get less sugar cravings. So they're going to actually want less sugar, right? Give somebody more protein in their breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Their energy levels are going to be much better. They're going to have more satiation throughout the day. They're going to be less likely to reach for something when they're really starving, which is typically, something that's going to give them a quick hit of sugar. More quality, right? You're not telling somebody you have to get rid of it. It's like, oh, you want to have bread, at your meals. Let's get a quality bread versus a not quality bread. You want to have a, whatever. Other examples of quality that isn't taking something away from somebody. It's just replacing it, right? And those 3 steps alone are often enough to elicit all the changes that we want for the person to have down the road, right? But they get skipped so quickly because people are excited to well, if you stop eating this, you're going to have this profound change. And yeah, I know if you stop eating crappy carbs, you're going to have a profound change. But that's very difficult to get people to give something up rather than say, let's actually try and get them to remove crappy carbs by adding in water and protein. And then they actually don't feel like they want that anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff. I mean, I just think about how with all of this, it was really aiming at habits, behaviors, and certain skills that you need to kind of acquire to make some changes within food. And then coming back to your lens that you kind of view a lot of this through, it's that was developed through just exposure that you had through watching other people and resonating with culinary arts and things like that over time that really kind of help you develop this lens that made a lot of the things that may be difficult for other people relatively a little bit easier to do than somebody who doesn't. So it's instead of chasing after the sexy thing at the time, whether it's macros, keto, whatever is standing out, I think that if you spend some time with the questions and with some of these approaches, you might have a good starting point that could show you some change.
The book will follow. That's right. This is good stuff.
Yeah. Well, if you had any questions on this one, because the nutrition ones seem to be really resonating with people. So I'd love to hear more around just what's on top of mind, what you want to hear about, any questions you have. Make sure you head over to speakpipe.com/lookgoodmovewell.
Yeah, totally. And then, just to your point, it's why are the nutrition episodes resonating with people so much? Because it's just instrumental to our lives every day. We eat every day. It impacts our energy and our mindset and our physical performance so directly. And it's something that takes a lot of time and awareness around to build healthy relationships and to understand. And so many people were brought up in this, Western society in an age where, it was about speed, it was about, low quality, packing things full of sugar, and all of this lifestyle around food just stripped people of their awareness around food, or they never had an opportunity to develop awareness. And so starting this process of learning some awareness around your food, it's just the beginning. It needs to happen for a long time. And, I'm grateful that I've had, close to 10 years at least, maybe a little bit more, a little less, of thinking about food and how it impacts me in an emotional, physical, and, psychological way. And then asking some of these questions and making changes. And that is, in episodes past, that's where I've just been so anti-counting, because I don't believe that just a simple recipe of numbers is going to raise people's awareness to a level that will give them freedom from, like the food challenges for the rest of their life. It will solve problems in the short term, and it will breed long-term problems. So anyway, take that as a little send-off message, but it's super important to me to think about establishing awareness practices for a long time with food, not just for this week.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, thank you so much for listening, guys.
Yep.
And
Thank you.
see you next
See
time.
you next time.